Hello? Yes.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this panel, When the Meter Fights Back. So, today we're going to talk about energy bills and discuss what they consist of and why the bill is going up and what to do about it. Our first presenter, Todd, go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks. I'm Todd Bianco. I'm a state employee. I work for the agency called the Public Utilities Commission. I have to start with a caveat, which is that the commission is 3 people and they speak by majority vote. So when I tell you something, it's my opinion unless I can refer to a decision that they've adopted or some policy they've adopted. What I want to show you today is just some things on your bill so you have some context of what these different factors are on your bill, what's the responsibility of the company. That'll be Greg Cornet talking about what they do. Kery Schlichting will be talking about wholesale markets, and all of that's on your bill, and I just want to run through that. But before I do, I just want to tell you what the Public Utilities Commission does. So in a normal market, what we're used to, it's competitive. So anybody can enter it and offer products, and customers can choose who they buy from. And this sort of drives folks to decide which products they want to buy at the lowest price. It drives the competitors to offer fair products at a reasonable price. And if they don't, if they're charging too much for the same thing that everybody else is, nobody will buy their stuff. And if they have a bad product and they're charging the same price, nobody will buy their stuff. They go out of business. And that's basic supply and demand. And we see that a lot in America. But sometimes it doesn't make sense to have competition. So, for public utilities where it's capital intensive and you're trying to get to folks' homes, you need to work in the streets, the public right of way. You could have public competition for water companies, and there might be 9 or 10 water pipes serving homes in your neighborhood. But what will eventually happen is all those pipes serve only some of the customers. They might serve none of the customers on a street, but all that investment is still required to get past the street. What you would eventually work toward anyway is either one company being a monopoly, all of the companies charging an exorbitant amount, or no company is willing to take that risk. It's just not worth it to put a pipe in the ground and then lose your customers because of competition. So governments a long time ago recognized this and started giving franchise rights to certain corporations, like Greg's company, Rhode Island Energy, which is Narragansett Electric, gas and electric. And they say, listen, you have the exclusive right to transmit electricity and use the public way to transmit gas. We have that for water companies, wastewater, some ferry service as well. And that's what my agency oversees. Because there's no competition, they have this right. It's like a government right. You're the only one who's going to do it, and you have the power of eminent domain. You can work in the public space. It comes with government-like responsibilities. So regulated monopolies, because they're free of competition, but they have to, in order to keep that franchise, offer their services at non-discriminatory rates and terms and conditions. And they have to offer services that are efficient, reliable, safe, and economically beneficial. They also have to offer them at rates that are just and reasonable. So any company is in business to make some money if they make an investment, but at the same time, they shouldn't be price gouging their customers. Competition usually provides that balance between buyers and sellers. In a monopoly market, Greg's company could charge whatever it wanted, and might without some government oversight. So a long time ago, everybody agreed, including the companies, that government oversight of rates and practices is warranted. And that's what the commission does. So the commission is not there to defend ratepayers, and it's not there to advocate for the company. We're actually in between ratepayers and the company, just like market competition is. So that's the role we're playing, is to drive down the costs so the company, as though it's in a competitive market, but also to make sure the company is providing to customers and getting enough money to provide safe, reliable, and economically beneficial services. So if you review one of our dockets, that's a case. The company can't change its rates or its services. Just like a restaurant, a restaurant can change its menu and what it charges whenever it wants. Greg's company, water companies, they can't. They have to come to the commission and say, this is what we want to offer on our menu, and this is what we plan to charge. And it's the commission that gets time to review that, up to 9 months to vote and decide whether or not that's going to be allowed. If you were to review that and see what we do, and you can watch that publicly, it's all public, it would look a lot like a court case. So witnesses, Greg's employees, employees for the state at the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers, on behalf of ratepayers, the Attorney General on behalf of Rhode Islanders. You might see the George Wiley Center on behalf of low-income customers enter our cases and have witnesses support exhibits and testimony under oath to convince the commission of the reliability of their case. The commission reviews all that, and that's my job, is to help them review the reams of paper filed by the parties, make sure they understand all the issues and options in front of them. And then they get together in public. They never talk about the case privately. That's contrary to the Open Meeting Act. And they make a vote. And when they do, now the menu can change depending on what the commission decides. Now the price can change depending on what the commission decides. So now that I've explained that, I do want to show you the menu, the bill, just going to forward. I'm so nervous about clicking too fast. Just going to try one more time. Thank you. So when the company does that, right, normally when you have services, like you go to a competitive market, you might see a menu, right? You go to a restaurant, there's a menu, that's what it is, you get to decide. You don't get to decide here. If the commission approves the menu, that's what's going to be provided to customers, and that's what you're going to be charged. You might also see this in terms of a contract, right? You have a contract with some supplier, and your terms and conditions for that contract and the prices stay until the end of the contract, or until the two of you as parties agree to amend that and you sign it. This is sort of like that. You don't sign a contract with the public utility. They file the tariff with us, which is almost like a public contract that describes the terms and conditions and price of these services. And that's on file with the commission, and you can view those. Here's an October bill that we're going to skip just for the purposes of time. Thanks so much. I'm going to show you my bill. So the first thing you would notice is, the first thing I noticed is that my last bill was $760, and that didn't happen. That is, I was accidentally unenrolled in auto pay and didn't know it until I got a service termination notice, which is not a good look if you're the economist for the Public Utilities Commission. But so I settled that up, and this is my February 3rd to March 3rd bill, and I did do about $200 in energy services that month. What I want to orient you to is the left side of the bill and the right side of the bill, right? So talking about restaurants, I'm going to do a lot of food analogies. When you order food, right, you order pizza, a long time ago, if you got it from like Caesars or Papagino's, the person who delivered it to you worked for the pizza company, right? Worked for the pizza place. But now you might order and get the food from DoorDash or Grubhub. That's the way that electricity works now, right? So a long time ago, Narragansett Electric owned power plants, right? That was the pizza restaurant, South Street or Manchester Street station around the corner, for example. The state decided that actually that could be moved out of the monopoly market and into a competitive market. And that competitive market is actually organized by Kery and her group, and she can talk about how that works. They're still responsible for getting you that pizza. That's what Grubhub does, right? That's what DoorDash does. And they're going to charge you for it. They're not going to eat the cost of the pizza and let you eat the pizza, but they're just passing that through to you. Greg's company is the delivery company, like UPS or like DoorDash, right? That's their job, and that's where they're making their money. So the left side of the bill is supply. Kery's going to talk about that. The right side of the bill are your delivery charges. So I'm going to zoom in on my delivery charges. This is page 2 of my electric bill. I think that worked. How do I? Oh, it's just scrolling. If you zoom in on the right side. All right, so here's the delivery charges, and the first thing most people like, I get a lot of calls at the PUC. I like to talk to ratepayers, and folks say, these are delivery charges. There's almost nothing on here that looks like delivery to me. So here's I did 668 kilowatt hours of energy consumption. I have a customer charge. I have 2 things that look like they're related to renewable energy and energy efficiency, something called transition, that's basically zero, and transmission charge. That sounds like delivery, but so does distribution. The next thing I want to show you is where all those charges come from, because I'm going to talk about them really briefly. If you want to see them and how they end up on your bill, there's a tariff. The company has a better web page than us for where they keep their tariffs, and I'm going to show you the top tariff is the summary of retail rates. Now, the one I'm going to show you, the company also has a history of them. I'm going to use the history because my bill's from February and rates change in April. So if you click that link today, you'll see the April 1 rates, but I'm going to show you February. Thank you. So like I said, here's your distribution charge, right? So if you're getting it from Grubhub, this is for the pizza. This is for driving the pizza to your house, right? Gas, maintaining the vehicle, the driver, the app they might use. Maybe they have sat nav or something like that. Car insurance. This is what Greg's company needs to run its business. Poles and wires we see in our neighborhoods to get power to your house. The energy that's on the left side of your bill traveling over the roads on your right side of your bill. The other thing you'll see, I'm going to go to the next slide, see if it works. There are a couple of, down in the bottom, 2 charges related to renewable energy. And that's actually related to 3 charges in detail in the tariff, which are related to, if you want to look at it, 4 programs, but another way to look at it is maybe 2 dozen programs for renewable energy. They all basically do the same thing. So this would be like I ordered pizza, Grubhub brings me the pizza, and then on my pizza bill it says green salad fee. And he's like, well, I didn't get a green salad. Did you get a green salad? Nobody got the green salad. What happens is, in order to be the delivery company, in addition to those other responsibilities I described, Greg's company has responsibility to procure renewable energy, pay customers and developers for that renewable energy, and deliver it into Kery's market. They buy it at a certain price. That price is also set by tariffs and program rules and contracts with individual large facilities. And then the price that they sell it for is actually driven by the wholesale market and how that clears. So you might buy the salad at a fixed price of $30, and then you deliver it to the wholesale market and you sell it for $5 or $10. There's a $20 difference that the Grubhub guy gets to roll into his bill when he delivers pieces. And that's what's happening here. Take Block Island Wind Farm. That contract price right now, when those turbines spin, is about 30 cents a kilowatt hour. When it gets sold, all those products, we are selling it for about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. The 20 cents over the course of a year adds up to about $15 or $20 million, which puts about 0.2 of a cent on a typical customer like my bill. And the reason why you see 3 charges is just 3 different programs and there's 3 different ways to collect the money. Moving to the left, if you were in the tariff, and moving to different rows on my bill, I'll just go quickly. The lie heap enhancement charge is, again, the responsibility of being a delivery company is they also have a fee, like you might see on your cable bill, there's a fee. And that's to help DHS fund programs when customers who need a grant to help pay for their heating, assistance, funding in the winters. Rhode Island Energy is responsible for collecting that money. And it's always 78 to 81 cents because by law, it's collecting $7.5 to $8.5 million. The number of customers in Rhode Island does fluctuate, so it's always going to be the A divided by B. The transmission charge is coming a little tricky. Transmission is another delivery, right? But so I order my pizza, I'm going to go to Caserta's, right? That's what I like. But maybe you're too good for that and you got to get your pizza from New Haven, right? They also have good pizza. I'm willing to respect it. It's going to come over the state highways, right? It's a longer distance. Somebody's going to bring that pizza to your local Grubhub guy, and then he's going to bring it to you. He's going to get a bill, and he's going to pass that on dollar for dollar. He's not going to raise the fee. He's going to pass it on. Rhode Island Energy is a transmission customer. Their distribution system pays bills to transmission companies. Now, they're also a transmission company, so that's a little confusing. So they're charging themselves. They do it through Kery's organization, ISO. ISO sends Rhode Island Energy, your distribution company, transmission bills. And then they tell the commission, we spent $150 million on transmission last year. We're going to pass that on to the customers, and that's what these charges are doing. The base transition charge, this one's going to be 0. All right, but what this was, like I said, a long time ago, they used to own pizza joints, and now they don't. Those are competitive. Backing out of the ownership of those deals had costs to the company, and the law said when we did that, they would be made whole. It's 0, but it's useful to have this charge on your bill as a placeholder in case we need to send a credit to customers or repay some other charge that doesn't belong anywhere else on your bill. So we do keep that there, but expect it to be 0. The final one all the way over is the energy efficiency charge. Maybe you don't need as much pizza as you've been ordering, right? You only need 1 pizza, but you've been ordering 7. Or maybe you can wait till 8 o'clock at night to eat your pizza, but you keep ordering at 5, right? So there's going to be rush fees. Greg's company collects money to help you, incentivize you to buy the right amount of pizza at the right time, and that's what that fee does. They use that money to pay you and run programs so that everyone can save some money on the total cost of pizza. There is more detail I wanted to show you. I want to be respectful to my other panelists, but I wanted to just show you really briefly something I think you need to know as we talk. And that's about this distribution energy charge. So the detail is, if you go to the second page of that tariff, the distribution energy charge itself is 12 separate charges. And the ones I want to highlight really briefly are the one all the way over on the right on the top row called the RDM, Revenue Decoupling Mechanism. The company used to make more money every time it sold more energy, right? So more pizza you deliver, you go out for one drive, but somebody orders 5 pizzas, you get 5 times the money. That interferes with the company's incentive or disincentivizes the company to allow and promote energy efficiency and the green salad programs that we're talking about. So what we decided back in 2010 was the company's revenue requirement, which is all the way over in the on the left, called the distribution charge. They need about $300 million a year. By the way, I don't know if I told you this. If you see a cent on your bill per kilowatt hour, that means the company needed about $70 million. So if you see 4.5 cents, the company needed about $300 million. That's what they asked for in their last rate case. That number has not changed since 2021. There was a rate case filed in 2017. There was an increase approved in 18, 19, and 20 as part of that. And then it hasn't changed since then. The company is in front of us now for the first time in a decade with a new rate case. And you say, every time I turn around, the rates are changing. They are. It's the other factors on this chart. But that one all the way over on the left, the base charge to run the business, the workers, the polls, taxes, the depreciation, the gas for the trucks, all of that is built into that first column. And if the company collects more than $300 million, if they collect 314 because we use more kilowatt hours, they have to give us that $14 million back. That's what's going on in the RDM. You see it's about 0.3 cents. That year, the company actually did collect about $24 million more than the target revenue requirement. And so they paid that back to us in a negative charge. Every time I used energy, the company paid me almost 0.3 cents back. Everything else I'll skip and just point to one thing that has provided some upward pressure on your bills, and that's just these first two. So the distribution charges to run the business, everything else there is a relief valve. If a company did not make more money when it sold more of its product, and they only come in for new rates, right, new menu prices once every 10 years or 5 or 10 years, they would be out of business quickly, right? Or they'd have to come in and change their prices every time inflation or every time some cost happened. And we don't really want that. So we also don't want the company not to invest in keeping the pizza parlor clean, right? Buying new ovens, buying good ingredients. That's what's happening in these two columns. So an operation and maintenance charges on your bill. Annually, the company comes in and they propose some basic O&M. It's $14 million. That's why it's 0.2 cents on my bill. 13 million of it is to trim the trees, which is incredibly valuable to us. As you go out and, you're here in Providence, there's not as much trees. But as you go out to the western part of Rhode Island, the northwestern part, it's trees. And that tree trimming keeps our lights on. And it's worth having the company collect that money as they go along. If they don't, and they start saying, oh, I was earning 9% profit this year, now I'm down to 4%. DoorDash guy's going to stay at home, right? He could just buy a treasury bond and get 4%. Greg's company is going to start cutting back on some of these services. That's a reasonable thing for a company to do. We want them to trim the trees, so we give them this allowance. It's by law, by the way, but it's still a good idea. The other thing is the CapEx factor. You want the DoorDash guy to maintain his vehicle, right? Well, the company also has to invest in new stuff, new wires and poles. You might want to have a nursing school in an old substation. Somebody's got to pay for the new substation. That's what has to happen. And the company won't do that if it can't get new money, right? Because they'll make an investment, but they can't change the menu price. So they start earning less. Remember, the commission's job is to be between ratepayers, making sure they're getting good services, and the company to make sure they're getting a reasonable return. And so that's what those two things are doing. And you see that the CapEx factor charge is 0.8 cents. The company needs about $65 million for 9 years of incremental investment. $180 to $200 million a year approved by the commission in a budget results in about $150 million a year of new stuff being put into service every year, results in about like $7 million a year of new money that they need because you amortize it. You don't collect $200 million in 1 year. You collect it over 30 to 35 years. So you layer those years of investment. And by 9 years since the last rate case, it ends up being $65 million a year. And next year, it'll be a little bit more. And that's what's been pushing upward pressure on your distribution charge. Now, I'm going to stop there, but I did have a slide that showed how all these charges changed. And what you'd see is the distribution charge to run Greg's business has only gone up on my bill, about $4.50. which is not the major part. That's wholesale power transmission and the increasing size of the renewable and clean energy programs. None of those are bad things. They're just getting bigger on your bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm still in that analogy going forward because it's really good. I like it.
I'm not prepared for that analogy from the wholesale side, so we're just going to keep going. Todd, are you in charge of my slides?
I'm in charge of this
Yeah,
now.
great. Okay, perfect. So I am Kery Schlichting. I work at ISO New England. We are in charge of the pizza side of this story, of the ingredients that are making up this. And my role at the ISO is to work with Rhode Island lawmakers, the PUC, the Office of Energy and Resources, to liaise with them to make sure that the wholesale power system and the distribution system in Rhode Island, that we are in contact about how things are changing and how we are planning and maintaining reliability for now and into the future. So the next slide, Todd. We have three main roles at a very high level. We operate the power system, which means 24 hours a day, we are instantaneously balancing supply and demand. We run the markets. So this is the wholesale market, which we'll talk some more about. So that we can, if we're thinking about analogies, in this idea, we are the stock exchange. We are the platform where the commodity of energy is being sold and purchased. And then we are responsible for planning. We have responsibilities for looking to the next day, to the next year, the next 10 years, to make sure that now and in the future, reliability is met, to make sure that as we need more energy or less energy, the resources are available and the system is reliable. And that's perfect. This is really all comes down to one thing: reliability. The ISO, we are governed by the FERC in Washington, D.C., and we have the number one priority of reliability. States in New England have different policies that they enact for energy efficiency, for low-income heating aid, for renewable energy. Those are not under the ISO's jurisdiction. Those are state authority. We have the responsibility of making sure that the power is reliable and is on. So briefly, things we don't do. This is where Todd and Greg and I have different areas of authority. So we don't handle retail electricity. We don't own any power grid infrastructure. The only thing the ISO owns is a building that we operate and our staff work out of. We don't have any stake in companies that own infrastructure. We are a third party that is to be objective in running the power markets at the least cost and most efficiently. We don't have any jurisdiction over fuel infrastructure, so that includes LNG facilities, liquefied natural gas storage, any sort of pipeline, or any type of fuel that is outside our jurisdiction. We work with the generators that may use those fuels to create electricity, but we don't have any jurisdiction over them. We don't have any control over siting. If Rhode Island wants to build a generating facility, or any sort of a transmission line or a battery, that is their right and their decision to make. We have a role to make sure that if anything is interconnecting to the bulk power system, that it does so without creating undue harm on the existing system and creating reliability concerns. And finally, we don't plan the resource mix. We are in the business of energy, so we are looking at megawatts. It is up to the states through their policy decisions and through the market, through the signals of the prices that are being sent to show the region what type and where we need energy, or the states with their very specific goals. So when we think about the wholesale market, the markets in New England are based on least cost resources being turned on first. So we dispatch them based on price. There are three main components to the wholesale electricity markets. The energy market is in turquoise, and that's the largest component. So that's the real time and the day ahead markets. The ancillary services market is in orange. It's a very small component, and that provides very specific characteristics that we need to maintain reliability across the system. And then the forward capacity market. this is a market that is looking ahead to make sure that we have enough installed capacity to meet future needs. So while if we think about the energy markets as the real time, the day-to-day fluctuations, the capacity markets are looking into the future. Now, this is currently under review in the region. In the past, we were looking 3 years ahead to make sure we had enough energy, but the ISO, along with the New England states and stakeholders, are revising that to be a prompt and seasonal market. So that is currently underway, and it will be a big change for the region, but there are some real benefits, we hope, for the region that are coming out of that. So when we think about the wholesale power mix, the ISO is dispatching generators across the New England states. We are importing power from Canada and New York, and we are using those different resources to meet the instantaneous supply and demand of New Englanders. So when we think about costs in the region, it's really important to think about what our resources are. This chart shows the change from 2005 to 2025 in the type of resources we use. And again, if you think of this from an economic standpoint, we're looking at the least cost resources first. We have seen a great retirement of oil and coal as those resources became more expensive to run due to their age and environmental restrictions. And with the advent of fracking in the United States, natural gas became a lot cheaper, and we saw a great change in the natural gas percentage of installed capacity and energy resources. So natural gas makes up over 50% of the energy that we use annually. Nuclear and hydro and renewables and imports all also are important factors for different ways, but the natural gas is the main resource. And that causes some direct price fluctuations. New England is served primarily through pipelines that were built originally for residential and industrial home and business heating. Prior to the natural gas generating fleet being built, that was what those pipelines were for. Once the natural gas generators came online, they are now competing in a very basic supply and demand for that same limited pipeline resource. Pipelines did not get bigger. We don't have more coming in. So we get into a time where in the winter, there's great competition for those resources because people are using them to heat their homes, and there's only a little bit available for natural gas resources to generate power in the winter. And if you go to the next slide, Todd, you can see the correlation between wholesale energy prices and natural gas. Because of this reliance for over 51% of our energy resources, we are subject to high prices when natural gas prices are high. You can see this specifically with when we have had very cold winters, like this winter, prices were high because it was very cold. In 2017, 2018, if you were here, remember the polar vortex that we had very cold weather. And then because natural gas is a global commodity, we are also subject to price fluctuations based on global events. We see increases when Russia invaded Ukraine that caused high prices as other types of events. So in New England, when we think about how prices are fluctuating in supply, which is the pizza, dough, sauce, maybe ancillary services are our toppings, we're going to get there. The natural gas is a really big part of that. And when we look at the next slide, we think about wholesale versus retail prices. So what Todd talked about is the yellow line. That's the retail price. And we look at New England, the wholesale price is the blue price. And I know Greg's going to talk more about this as well. In New England, we are working with our local distribution companies to make sure that they have enough power. And these are the prices that my organization, the ISO, is responsible for in the wholesale system. And when you think about how this relates to a Rhode Islander, this is making sure that we have resources available for now and the hottest day of the hottest summer where it's the most humid and everyone has their AC on, that one day a year, the ISO is responsible for making sure we have enough to meet that day, as well as the coldest day of a 4-day cold stretch in the winter where snow is covering our solar panels, and we must also meet that demand. So we are a system that is built to meet these peaks, and that is really important for our reliability. And when we think about what that means for the future, my organization, through our planning, is looking ahead to see how is energy use changing in New England and what do we need to do as a region to ensure reliability now and then. So if you, on the next page, we have some resources about understanding the electricity prices in New England. I have some handouts out here, but we are just a small part in the regional discussion about why prices fluctuate, how they change, and it's really a many partnered conversation. There we go.
Thank you.
Yes, that's the next one. Thanks, Todd. My name is Greg Cornet. I'm the president of Rhode Island Energy. We are the dominant utility company here in Rhode Island. So we serve collectively about 770,000 customers across the state, with the exception of Block Island and what used to be referred to as the Pasco Utility District. It's now Clear River up in the Burrillville area. They have their own services, so we're the provider of natural gas and electricity across the state. Other than that, Todd and Kery gave a really good overview overall, so I'm going to try to avoid getting into too much of the additional details on some of those things. But what I really like about being on a panel like this is I think it gives folks a broader perspective. You know, we're the ones that send the bill out, so we're obviously the one that gets the most criticism when folks aren't happy about their bill. But the reality is, as you can see, there are a lot of other entities and people working behind the scenes, and we're all collectively working together. We've got different obligations, maybe sometimes different priorities, but at the end of the day, we're all working together with the sole focus, or the primary focus, of providing safe, reliable, and affordable energy to customers. And those are critical components, and none of the three is, in my opinion, more important than the other. They're all critically important. So I thought I'd give just a little bit of additional context. The reality is New England is typically about the third most expensive region for electricity in the country. You heard Kery talk a little bit about that. For us, there are largely two reasons why New England is, in that top. You can see Hawaii is typically the first. That makes sense, right? They're an island, so everything is more expensive to get out there. California is it's not an island, obviously. They've got a unique geography with a lot of weather challenges. They've also got very significant climate goals and very significant public policy programs, and just an overall high cost of living. So those things tend to influence California's prices. For us here in New England, it's largely a reflection of a couple of different things. One, it is our geography and where we're located in the country, and the fact that we don't have natural resources underfoot. And as Kery mentioned, we also don't have an abundance of supply options in the natural gas market coming into the region. We're at capacity with regard to what we have now in the region. She talked about that tug and pull during the winter, especially where you're competing for generation and home heating. Unless there is another pipeline built, and there's certainly a lot of debate around that, but unless there is, that's not going to change. We're going to be, continue to be constrained, and we're the only region in the country that has to rely on liquefied natural gas imports. That exposes us to more pressure from geopolitical and other price pressures. And then the other reality is here in New England, we also have our own, significant climate goals. And with that does come some additional public policy costs. Those are, every time I make that comment, people say, well, you shouldn't be talking about the costs. You should be talking about the benefits. There are benefits. I say it every single time. There absolutely are benefits, but there are costs too. So we have to be real about what is making up the components of the bill. So for us, that's why you tend to see New England being, in the top tier of cost across the country. And then you've got New York, a lot of the same reasons constrain them as constrains New England. And then you really have the rest of the country. I mean, you look at it right there. They're all right in the exact same sort of bucket in terms of prices. And there are some significant differences. Switch. The good news for us in Rhode Island is that we, even though we're in the third most expensive region, our electricity prices have tended to be below the average. So we're kind of middle of the pack, right underneath the average. And I think that's something we can all be, proud of. There are a lot of reasons. A lot of those renewable energy programs and energy efficiency programs are one example of why we've been able to keep those costs down. I believe and would like to hope that others could agree that our efforts to be efficient in our operations is another reason why the PUC and the division doing their jobs, making sure that we're operating as efficiently as we can is another reason why. But we tend to be about average or below average, which I know is not necessarily much comfort to a customer who's struggling with his or her bill, but it is a data point that I think is important. I'm just going to hit this a little bit. This is something we started doing a couple of years ago as we really started getting a lot of public concern, question, criticism in some areas about the bill. And what we wanted to do was to show our customers it with as much transparency as we could what all of the different buckets are of the cost. Because the reality is, as you heard Todd and Kery mention, we only, as Rhode Island Energy, across the year, on average, control about a third of the bill. There's about 2/3 of the bill that we have no control over whatsoever. And so we're sending the bill out. Everybody assumes that we're entirely responsible for it, but we're not. So we wanted to try to break this out, and we've started doing this in the summer and in the winter because the supply costs change, and there are all these other factors that Todd mentioned that change throughout the year. And so it's never exactly static, but this is a good snapshot. And you can see here that, we've got local delivery, which is the stuff that Todd spent the most time on in his presentation earlier. So that's about this summer. It's 26% of the bill. This is based on what's referred to as a typical residential customer. That's someone who's using about 500 kilowatt hours of electricity in a month. Many of us use more than that. Some folks use less than that. But that's just I'm not sure how we ever landed on 500. Really, it's something that the industry has used for a while, but it just provides a data point. So it doesn't mean your bill is going to be exactly that. But so 26% is local delivery, 18% is this summer is transmission. As Todd referenced earlier, we certainly have some influence on that here in Rhode Island because we have our own transmission needs and projects. But at the end of the day, we're paying Rhode Island's pro rata share of the entire New England grid. So that cost is also influenced by projects that are going on in Connecticut or in Maine or in New Hampshire, for example, Massachusetts. And then you've got the other piece, the pizza itself, the supply. This summer, it's about 33%, and then 23% are state mandates and taxes. And so those are all of those other programs that Todd mentioned. Plus, here in Rhode Island, we are required to act as a tax collector. The state has a gross earnings tax, and it's 4% for electric, 3% for gas. And that's just a direct pass-through. So we collect that and remit that money to the state. That's also included in that 23%. So you get a sense of what's making up the bill there. And then the other piece down at the bottom is, Todd mentioned our profit. And we go through this process every single time we go through a base distribution rate case. We're in one now. Right now, for that typical residential customer, that's less than 2.4% of their bill. That's about a little over $3 a month. That is actually coming back to compensate us for the services that we're providing. Todd gave a really good overview of the monopoly history and how that came to be. And you alluded to it several times, but what comes with that monopoly right are significant obligations. And among those are the obligation to serve. We have to stand ready to serve any customer that needs the service. And we're the provider of last resort service. If someone doesn't shop for their supply, or if they don't get it for some reason, through some other means, we're required to be able to provide that supply for them. And we're required to have the infrastructure in place to deliver that energy to them 24/7, 365, essentially. Switch. Just for perspective, and again, this is just to give some sense of what the main drivers have been in recent years in the increases in cost. We all know everything is more expensive than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. For us, it is, we've seen a significant increase in our actual costs of doing business. Just for example, a pole mount transformer is over twice the cost that it was 5 years ago. Wire is the same. Our pipes in the ground are the same. So the costs are significant. But those pieces, over the last 5 years on our side, the piece that we directly control, the distribution piece that's state regulated, has only grown by about 5%. And that's everything that's included in our cost of doing business: the poles, the wires, the men and women that we provide, that provide the service, our trucks and our equipment in our offices and storm response, all of those things. The public policy and tax costs have exponentially grown 50% over the last 5 years. And again, those bring many, many benefits. But when we talk about what's been driving the costs over the last 5 years, the increases have come more on the supply market. Again, that's there. Kery walked through a lot of the reasons why that's been increasing. We've had a lot of international and national disturbances and other issues that have impacted those prices. And we're continuing to grow our use of energy. So the cost of the supply and the demand just sort of reaches there. We can switch on. I want to try to end here because for us, this is the bread and butter of what we're doing. We're obligated to provide safe and reliable service. And you see this across the country, and it's particularly intense in New England, where we have we're one of the oldest infrastructures in the country in terms of energy delivery system. And it's like anything else that is a capital asset. It does degrade over time, and it has to be replaced. And so, what I get a lot of questions a lot of the times about, what are you guys spending your money on? What is coming in my delivery charge? And we get criticisms, frankly, that I think are very unfair and very inaccurate. That we have a bias to build capital, and that's the only thing that we care about because we're just trying to do it to make money. The reality is, we're doing it to keep the system safe and reliable and ready to meet our future electrification needs. And I think this really sort of gives you a good example of what that money goes towards. I mean, we've seen over the last several years a 16% decrease in the frequency of outages because of the vegetation management work that we've been doing, because of the investments that we've been making to harden the system. For example, steel poles as opposed to wood poles. Putting in additional new technologies. We do a lot of non-wires alternatives a lot of the time. We are one of the leaders in New England on dynamic line ratings on the transmission side. PPL, which is our parent company, was the first in the nation to use dynamic line ratings in Pennsylvania so that they can maximize the use of our existing transmission resources and provide real-time forecasts into PJM, which is their market, like New England ISO. We've got 7 of those sensors on our transmission lines here in Rhode Island. I believe we were the first to start deploying them, and New England ISO is working on getting its systems ready so that when they're ready, we'll be able to deliver those real-time forecasts into the market. And what that allows us to do is see an increase in transmission capacity, which our experience in Pennsylvania tells us is about 16% more on average than it would have been without using those sensors. And those sensors, by the way, are very cheap, very inexpensive, but it allows us to squeeze out as much energy on those transmission lines as opposed to building a new, bigger transmission line or another transmission line. So we're investing in all of those technologies, and that's helping us to keep our outages down, to deploy technology like our advanced meters that are being deployed, which will ultimately allow us to have not only much more information in the hands of our consumers, our customers, ratepayers, so that they know in 15-minute increments what energy they're using, what's drawing that energy, and be able to make decisions. And then eventually, Todd knows this because we got a proposal in front of the PUC right now in our rate case for a deployment of a framework to analyze time-varying rates so that we can ultimately, in the next couple of years or so, hopefully start deploying those as we get full deployment of our meters across the state and have a year or so to gather real-time data and make really good decisions in coordination with the division, the PUC, and the other interveners in our cases to develop hopefully a framework for time of use or time varying rates that will make sense for customers and help them to manage their expenses a little bit better and make better energy choice decisions. And then the last thing that all of these investments are doing is to allow us to make these distributed generation interconnections. I mean, we've over 20,000 megawatt, 553 megawatts in over 20,000 connections, and that's just a snapshot over the last few years. We have a significant penetration of distributed energy resources in this state, and that's going to continue to grow and expand. And that requires upgrades and changes to our infrastructure so that we can make sure that we're not creating unnecessary strain on the grid and that we are ready to make those interconnections. And as we move more and more towards an additional electrification in our system, we have to make these investments in order to be able to integrate those things and to help the state meet its clean energy goals. So that's, this is just a good, I think, way to wrap up my portion to just say, the money that we're spending is helping us to, improve reliability, make advancements on our system, and to support decarbonization across the state.
Thank you. Can you please move to the previous slide? That was excellent. Thank you so much. When I was looking at this, and I also live in New England, and just like with everybody, my bill is going up. So the question is, and you explained the reasons why it's going up and which component exactly. What about the future? Do we expect this trend to continue? What's to expect in the next couple of years?
Do you want to? I'll let you talk about the pizza, and then I'll talk about it.
From a regional perspective, the question is about costs is very hard to know because there's different states have different policies and different components that are driving changes in their bills. What we can tell from forecasting at the ISO that we anticipate more energy use. And when we think about the increasing use, when we electrify our cars, our buses, at the cities and states, at our homes, if we are using more energy, there is a supply cost to that of building new resources to meet those demands. And what we will have to decide on as a region is what those resources will be. We'll have a very large impact on that. When we think about siting a new natural gas plant in New England, that seems like a big ask and not something that is what the states and their policies want. We see offshore wind as an opportunity in New England for consistent, large-scale megawatts being brought into the system. But again, we don't know where that is going from a federal perspective. And so there's high costs to installation of those resources, but then lower fuel costs because once the wind is blowing, you're not buying another fuel, you're just operating your maintenance fees. So it really depends on how the supply is going to be met from an ISO's perspective about cost. When we think about the investment that we need, we know that the transmission system needs investment. I never knew in my job I would talk so much about woodpeckers holes on wood in infrastructure in New England. But when we think about investing in steel and undergrounding cables or different types of wires that we're using, there's trade-offs to everything. And I think that's really important. The policies They have real benefits for different types of services, different types of supplier providing. And I think it's really important to look at the holistic, but it's hard to see how we bring prices down. There is an opportunity, though, which is where ISO is going to partner with our states when we think about using less or being smart about when we use power. Are we using extra power when there's a lot of solar and wind to maximize the efficiency of those low-cost resources? And during the times of day, how we store power in batteries. These different discussions will help us as a region think about investing again for that peak, the hottest day. So if in 20 years, we as a region can think of ways to bring down that overall peak, we think about savings in transmission and supply that we have to invest in from an ISO's perspective to meet reliability. So there's a lot of different questions, and that's just that one perspective.
And I would say certainly on our piece, the distribution and even the transmission. I think we're going to obviously need to continue to invest in the system. We've made significant investments over the almost 5 years that we've owned the system here in Rhode Island. I don't anticipate that the amount of growth year over year is going to stay at the same trajectory necessarily, because we've made those investments. So we're going to need to maintain them, but we're not going to be making the same level of investments year over year once we get to the point where we feel that the system is where it needs to be, and we're getting there. But there's still going to be expenses, and the one unknown is what are material costs going to be? They've exponentially increased the last 5 years. Are we going to see some relief in that at some point? So that's hard to say. But for us, I think it's even looking at the supply piece and looking at the public policy and tax pieces. I think it's a hard message to deliver because people want costs to go down, and I just I transparently and honestly have a hard time seeing a scenario where you take all of these different pieces and things are going to dramatically go down. I think it's all about trying to essentially maintain the system and control the growth in costs as much as we possibly can, and find those areas where we can make some cuts and make some changes that help give headroom in other areas so that we overall control the pace of growth and the pace of cost on customers, because it is a very challenging time frame. We're in the middle of a very rigorous debate here in Rhode Island at the State House, and I know the same is happening in Mass around what our policies are going to be moving forward. That ranges from everything from very far aggressive rollbacks of things to moderate rollbacks to none at all. Maybe we double down on some things, and I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where that's going to land in another 6 weeks, but we're going to find out at some point. But my guess is there as well. We're going to continue investing in those energy efficiency and renewable programs, because again, they do have a lot of benefit. Maybe the state will make some changes to around the edges where some things were made a lot of sense 10, 15 years ago when we put them in place, but they need to be modified a little bit because the landscape has changed. And, just the other thing I would say on supply, I think if you'd asked us that question 3 years ago, we all had a very different outlook on what we thought the supply market was going to be in New England in terms of offshore wind, for example. If you look back at the one slide Kery had, we don't need to go back, but just there, you saw that the growth in 20 years in renewables in New England, and we've seen a lot of renewables, but it was only, I think, 6%. The reason for that largely is we've not, the projects that we're able to get in the ground during that time frame were smaller in scale. There are a lot of them, but you're talking 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 megawatts at a time, maybe 200 megawatts max at a time. The big game changer there was supposed to be offshore wind, because we could get these large scale projects and deliver, hundreds of megawatts. We're on the precipice of having a Revolution. It's already delivering power to the grid, but commercial operation later this year, and we've got Vineyard and other things. But we know that we're not going to see another one of those projects, at least not in the next few years, because there's nothing more in the ground and being planned, and everything's essentially been stopped. So a lot of unknowns there.
So
It's funny. Thank you so much. And lastly, what is your best advice? So I understand that the higher prices are here to stay, maybe for a little bit. So, as a citizen of New England, Rhode Island, or small business owner, what is your best advice? How to be a good participant of the grid and maybe save some money?
I'll start first and give you a few thoughts. I mean, I think the best thing that and I tell customers this all the time, is be educated. Educate yourself. We've got a lot of information on our website. PUC and the division have a lot of information on their website. A lot of others have similar information out there. There's a tremendous amount of resources, but be an educated consumer. In Rhode Island, customers on the electric side have the ability to shop for their supply. So that's a good option. You need to pay attention to what you're doing and make educated choices. Take advantage of the programs that we have. The energy efficiency programs, for example. We sometimes struggle to get, for example, landlords with multi-use units. They're not always that interested in those programs. So we've been having a push to try to get those folks more engaged in the process. And we need educated consumers. We need you to make more choices. We're working hard to try to arm you with more information when we roll out the smart meters with the Sense app, which is a third-party app that will allow you to have detailed information on your usage. That'll be fantastic. But there are a lot of state incentives and other programs out there to help lower your energy usage or to lower your burden. I would just encourage everybody to take advantage of the resources that are out there and to try to be educated and make as many smart choices as they can.
Well, you saw my bill. I'm not sure that I'm the best person to ask. But you do want to be educated, and you also want to be aware of what you're getting and what's happening around you, I think. And so know your bill, know what information you can have, and also understand that you're part of a state, right? Like a 400-year-old community in terms of the government we have, and older before that for the folks who were here before we arrived. And I just would say, there are trade-offs with the investments we have to make. And as you advocate for against those trade-offs, if you're thinking about renewables, you're thinking about smart meters, you're thinking about transmission lines, and natural gas usage and alternatives, heat pumps, understand that you are one person in part of a larger thing, and that your one decision can save you money, but everybody making decisions together, being comfortable with some compromises is probably the only way to get to the most efficient market outcome. And that last line starts like I'm going to say something really beautiful, and then I go, to get to the most efficient market outcome. But I truly believe that an organization and an understanding not of just the impact to you, but your impact and what the larger community needs is really the only way we'll get the best possible outcome. So be aware of that too, if you can.
And I would say that if you think of the cheapest megawatt is the one that isn't used, that we didn't have to build more infrastructure, more generation for. So there is real value in thinking about how we, as a group of states, are thinking about energy use as an infinite, endless thing that is not maybe what that is. And it's really important that we think about policy decisions that have impacts on our day-to-day lives in New England, and that there is a place for you to have advocacy and to educate yourself. The RICEW, we do a lot of community outreach. We do informational webinars, office hours. We have a community focus group that we try to educate, because we are a very small part of what you normally think about in energy, but we play a big role. So I would encourage everyone to ask questions and use the resources that your states have, and think about, what is the most efficient way. Again, market efficiency. We're going to have to come back to it one more time.
All right. But then, spy. Thank you
Thank you so much.